There's a war happening inside your mind every day. One side pulls you toward distraction, chaos, reaction. The other pulls you toward stillness, power, and control. The outcome of that war is not random, it is dictated by your brain's operating state. And at the center of that battlefield lies the alpha circuit. Alpha brain waves are the sacred rhythm between silence and action, the electrical signature of a man who is both calm and ready. They are not noise, they are signal. They are not passivity, they are restraint wrapped in power. In this state, your brain stops reacting and begins commanding. Thoughts become aligned, breath deepens, vision stabilizes. The alpha circuit is not something you need to invent, it is something you must return to. It is your original design, a frequency God placed into your nervous system before fear, before shame, before the noise of a world that constantly pulls you away from yourself. You were never built to be frantic. You were built to govern the space within your own mind with the still authority of someone who remembers where he comes from. Alpha is the frequency of leadership. It is not just how monks meditate or how warriors breathe before battle. It is how the mind prepares itself to hear clearly, decide wisely, and act without hesitation. It is how the prophets heard the voice in the whisper. It is how great men moved nations with stillness, not rage. When alpha waves increase, your brain begins to synchronize thought with purpose. Distractions lose weight. Fear loses grip. You begin to notice the space between stimulus and response, and that space is where power lives. That space is where God speaks. That space is where a man rises in the alpha state. You are not a slave to thought, you are the one choosing which thoughts matter. You are not drowning in noise, you are filtering for truth. The nervous system, when trained properly, defaults not to panic but to posture. Not to collapse but to command. Your posture changes your mind. Your breath changes your chemistry. And together they invite the alpha circuit to take over. This is not magic. It is not positive thinking. It is electrical, hormonal, and divine. It is what happens when a man learns to sit in discomfort without fleeing, to hold his gaze when the world trembles, to stay grounded in storms that make others run. Alpha is not something you feel. It is something you become. The man in alpha walks slower but sees further. He speaks less but his words carry more. He reacts less but his choices pierce deeper. This is the man whose nervous system has become a fortress, not because he shut down but because he trained up. It is not about dominance over others, it is dominion over self. It is internal order manifesting as outward clarity. And it begins with returning to that frequency that was yours from the beginning, before the anxiety, before the overthinking, before the world taught you to be reactive. The alpha circuit is the inheritance of every man willing to silence the noise, train the body, and align with the frequency of heaven itself. Breathwork and visual anchoring are tools to deliberately shift brain activity into the alpha range. Breath is the divine switch built into your nervous system, a sacred lever between chaos and calm, between reactivity and control. You don't need a pill, you don't need a screen, you need to remember how to breathe like you were made to. Not shallow, not rushed, not anxious, but deliberate, grounded, full. When you inhale slowly and exhale even slower, something powerful happens. Your heart rate slows, your thoughts begin to align, and your brain enters a lower frequency. Not sleep, not distraction, but focused stillness. This is the alpha rhythm, and breath is the doorway into it. It is not superstition, it is neurobiology meeting ancient wisdom. The breath of man was the first thing given in the garden, and it remains the key to presence, posture, and power, but breath alone is not enough. The eyes are the steering wheel of the brain. When your gaze is darting, scattered, pulled by every flicker of movement or notification, your mind mirrors that chaos. But when you fix your gaze, when you anchor your eyes on one point, one space, one vision, the brain receives a signal. We are not threatened, we are here, we are focused. Visual anchoring stabilizes the cortex. It interrupts the pattern of distraction. It turns off the survival alarm that's been falsely ringing in the background of your life for years. One anchored gaze paired with slow breath can change your state within seconds. That's not motivational talk, that's hardwired design. You were not made to be pulled in 10,000 directions. You were made to fix your eyes like flint and breathe like a man in command. Every time you control your breath, you reclaim dominion over your state. Every time you anchor your eyes, you tell your nervous system, this ground is ours, this moment is ours, alpha is not a mystery. It is the natural result of a body trained to obey the spirit, not the storm. The world wants your attention because it knows that's where your power lies. But you take it back when you breathe slow and look steady breathwork and gaze control aren't side rituals, they're warfare. They are tools for spiritual and neurological alignment. They don't just calm you, they rewire you. They don't just relax you, they re-establish authority, and when practiced daily, they become habits of sovereignty. You're not just calming down, you're stepping up, you're turning down beta noise and entering alpha clarity. The breath becomes your weapon, the eyes become your compass. And from that place, you no longer chase control, you radiate it, closing the eyes and controlling visual input, reduces cortical noise and strengthens internal command. The human brain is wired to respond to vision first. Over 50% of the cortex is devoted to processing what you see, not what you hear, not what you think, but what you see. That means visual input dictates the majority of your mental state. It is why the world constantly fights for your gaze. Every advertisement, every notification, every flash of light isn't just trying to sell you something. It's trying to control your nervous system. And when your eyes are undisciplined, your brain becomes chaotic. The circuits that should be focused on purpose are hijacked by distraction. You lose command not because you're weak, but because you're overstimulated. When you close your eyes, not to sleep, but to reset, you interrupt that flood. You lower the incoming noise, you signal to your nervous system that it's safe to turn inward, to focus, to realign. In that moment, cortical activity begins to slow. The brain is no longer flooded with external demands, so it begins to stabilize. Alpha waves begin to rise, and you begin to hear again not the world, but yourself. That quiet voice of clarity that's been buried under the noise. That signal of conviction that only speaks when you create space for it. Closing the eyes is not withdrawal, it's initiation. It's how you re-enter the inner command center where real leadership is formed. Control of visual input goes beyond closing the eyes. It means choosing what enters your field of vision at every moment. It means treating your gaze like sacred territory. Every time you choose not to look, not to scroll, not to chase novelty, not to consume noise, you strengthen the circuits of discipline. The same circuits that are responsible for memory, for focus, for moral reasoning. You are not simply ignoring distraction. You are training the brain to submit to the will instead of the world. Alpha frequency increases when you reduce visual chaos. When the brain no longer has to process dozens of competing images, it can return to internal alignment. This is the same frequency found in deep prayer, in elite focus, in the space between thought and decision. It is not emotionless, it is emotion under control. It is not detachment, it is grounded presence. It is the neural state of men who lead their homes, their minds, and their movements without being moved by every flicker in their environment. The eyes were designed not just to see, but to choose. To choose what is worthy of focus, what is worthy of attention, what is worthy of shaping the inner world. And when you master what you allow in, you begin to master what comes out. The man who controls his vision controls his brain. And the man who controls his brain steps into the alpha circuit, not as a visitor, but as a rightful heir. Stillness trains the nervous system to generate alpha dominance without relying on external stimulation. Stillness is not the absence of action, it is the presence of full command. It is where the nervous system ceases its frantic searching and returns to order. In a world that worships movement, noise, speed, and stimulation, stillness has become rare. But it is precisely in stillness that the alpha circuit is forged. When a man can sit without needing to be entertained, when he can breathe without rushing to the next thing, when he can hold his posture without collapsing inward, his nervous system is no longer being dragged by the external, it begins leading from the internal. This is not laziness, it is spiritual warfare. Because stillness trains the system to stop begging for stimulation and start operating from strength in stillness. The dopamine system calms down. The need for novelty weakens, the mind begins to clear, but deeper than that, something more eternal happens. The nervous system begins to align with the design it was created for. Not for addiction, not for compulsive consumption, not for dopamine slavery, but for rulership, for clarity. For dominion, stillness is not passive. It is a conscious decision to cut off every noise and say, I will not be moved unless purpose moves me. I will not respond unless mission calls me. The alpha state emerges not when everything is exciting, but when everything is quiet, and you still carry power. The man who trains himself to be still is not training for the moment of stillness. He is training for the chaos, because when the storm comes, and it will, the man who has practiced stillness won't flinch. His nervous system will not scramble, his brain will not enter panic, because it has been wired over and over again to remain anchored in low stimulation power. That's what the alpha circuit is. It is the baseline of mental and spiritual leadership, not when everything is under control, but when everything is out of control and you remain unmoved. Stillness teaches the body that safety is not found in scrolling, in eating, in moving, in reacting. It teaches that safety is found in still presence. This builds a system that obeys your command rather than your cravings. It builds a mind that can see clearly without the pressure of performance. It builds a man who can walk into high-stress environments and lower the temperature just by being there, because his very presence radiates what his nervous system has practiced in the unseen. You don't build alpha by pushing harder. You build it by being still longer, not in apathy, not in escapism, but in discipline, in sacred pause, in reclaiming the pace your brain was made to operate from before the world taught you to sprint toward burnout. Stillness is how prophets heard God. It's how warriors waited before the battle. It's how leaders form decisions that outlast noise. And it is how you train your system to generate strength without needing stimulation to sustain itself. Directed challenge and discomfort reactivate dormant circuits responsible for strength and leadership. The human brain does not grow through ease, it grows through confrontation, not the kind imposed from the outside, but the kind that is chosen from within. Discomfort is not your enemy, it is your proving ground. It is the forge in which the alpha circuits are reignited after years of soft living and constant escape. You were not wired for comfort, you were wired for capacity, and the only way to return to that original blueprint is to embrace resistance, not resent it. When you place yourself willingly in environments that test your discipline, cold, hunger, silence, strain, solitude, you awaken neural pathways that have been asleep since the day you stopped pushing. These are not theoretical concepts. This is physiology. When you step into discomfort that you've chosen, not forced suffering but controlled challenge, your prefrontal cortex activates in a unique way. You begin to build what neuroscience calls top-down control. That means you stop reacting like prey and start acting like a commander. Your breath remains steady, your focus sharpens, and your inner voice, the one buried beneath dopamine addictions and emotional fog, becomes louder. Controlled discomfort puts you back on the throne of your own biology. It returns you to the original design. Lead your body or be led by it. Every moment of challenge you embrace. You are not just training muscles. You are training neural circuitry, circuits for grit, circuits for focus, circuits for delay of gratification. And all of these converge into the alpha circuit, the mode of leadership, presence, and unshakable command. This is the reason ancient rites of passage were drenched in hardship, because spiritual and neurological maturity cannot be downloaded, it must be endured, it must be earned. The nervous system remembers pain, but more importantly, it remembers who you were in pain. If you ran, it encodes weakness. If you breathed through it, it encodes power. Discomfort is not just a teacher, it's a mirror in a world where everything is made easier, more accessible, and more instantly gratifying. The man who chooses the narrow road of self-inflicted challenge becomes rare, but rare is another word for leader, and leadership starts in the brain, in circuits that fire only when stress is met with steadiness. Your capacity for discomfort is your capacity for spiritual and mental weight. If you cannot hold pain, you cannot hold purpose. And if you avoid the burn, you forfeit the blessing. This isn't about becoming harsh or reckless. It's about becoming holy through hardship. It's about activating the part of you that was made in the image of a creator who formed men not for passivity, but for pressure. Controlled challenge builds internal gravity, it anchors you, it rewires you, it breaks fear and builds fire. The fire that doesn't scream, but radiates, the fire that doesn't panic, but stays rooted. That's alpha, and it is waiting behind every test you stop running from. Dominance has been corrupted in language, twisted into something loud, violent, reactive. But real dominance, the kind that is etched into the nervous system of a disciplined man, is not about shouting, threatening, or overpowering. It is about presence, it is about stability, it is about a brain and body that remain regulated when the environment is not. Dominance is the ability to enter chaos without becoming it, to enter conflict without losing clarity. It is not a trait you are born with. It is a skill you build by learning how to command your internal state in the middle of external storms when pressure rises. Most people's nervous systems betray them. Heart rate spikes, breathing becomes erratic, focus collapses, and emotion takes the wheel. That is not strength. That is survival mode. Dominance begins where survival ends. It begins when you train your nervous system not to be thrown around by intensity, but to carry intensity with calm. And that training does not happen in comfort. It happens in the hard moments, in confrontation, in fatigue, in delayed gratification, in the times where silence feels heavy and action feels risky. That's where the dominant nervous system is forged, not through violence, but through vision that does not blink. A regulated nervous system is not a passive one. It's a system that feels the same adrenaline spike as anyone else, but knows how to channel it. It breathes slower, sees wider, moves with precision. That's what makes men magnetic. That's why true leaders walk into a room and alter the atmosphere without saying a word. Their nervous system broadcasts strength, not noise, not tension, strength, because every cell, every breath, every movement is rooted in control. And that control does not come from faking it. It comes from thousands of micro decisions to not let the world dictate your internal tempo. This is not about becoming cold. This is about becoming composed. Coldness disconnects. Composure commands. Dominance isn't control over others. It's control over self in such a way that others feel safer, sharper, and more aligned around you. That's what happens when your alpha circuits are alive. You stop needing to dominate environments because you are the environment. Your nervous system sets the tone. You walk into stress and remain still. You face disorder and create structure. You deal with noise and bring silence without withdrawing, but by standing, by choosing, by regulating. The man who learns this lives differently. He doesn't waste energy proving. He doesn't react to bait. He doesn't inflate to appear strong. He radiates because he is strong. And that strength is not a feeling, it's a frequency. It's the alpha rhythm pulsing through a nervous system that has been trained not just to survive pressure, but to command through it. That's dominance, and it's not something you earn once. It's something you practice daily, in breath, in posture, in presence.